was born completely colorblind, so I've never seen color. I was born with achromatism, which means that I see things in grayscale. I've never seen blue, green, pink. I don't know what color looks like because I've never seen it. So as a child, I tried to ignore the existence of color, but it was impossible for me to ignore the existence of color because people who see color keep mentioning it every single day in daily elements like Yellow Pages, Bluetooth, Greenpeace, Red Cross, Pink Panther, the Green Card, James Brown is in his last name. So I kept hearing the names of colors. Also, there's this huge country called Greenland. So it's impossible to ignore the existence of color even if you don't see it. Also, when you use color as a code, it's a bit confusing. Hot water, cold water, sometimes it's only expressed through color. Also, maps use a lot of color codes. This is fine, but if you go to Tokyo, I could get easily lost because some maps are really focused on using color as a code. Then when I was trying to learn the colors of flags, I had this situation. So they share exactly the same flag. And when I was talking to people, if someone would ask me, have you seen a man with ginger hair, blue eyes, and dressed in pink? I would have absolutely no idea, because the only information I get here is that the man has hair, that he has eyes, and that he's not naked, basically. So the reason why I wanted to sense color is because it's a social element. I didn't want to change my black and white perception of life. I think that seeing in grayscale has many advantages. There's many species that see in grayscale. People who see in grayscale, we have better night vision. We can see longer distances because color doesn't interfere with our perception of distance. We can detect camouflages more easily. And also photocopies are cheaper in black and white. So I didn't want to change my sight, but I wanted to have a sense of color because of its social element. So when I was studying what color was, I realized that there's been many theories relating color and sound. Isaac Newton created this theory in 1675, relating each color of the rainbow to a musical note. And he was right. Color and sound have something in common. They're both frequencies. Color is a light frequency, and sound is an audio frequency. So they're both frequencies. So now we have the technology of knowing what the frequency of each color is. So if we could hear the frequency of red, we would hear a note between F and F sharp. So 15 years ago, when I was at university, I started a project in order to bring Isaac Newton's theory into practice, and I created this prototype with Adam Montandon, which was basically a camera that detected the frequency of the color, and then it allowed me to hear the vibration of each color. So I slowly started memorizing the colors around me by the notes. So I learned that F was red, yellow was G, C sharp was blue, and I kept memorizing the colors until I was able to sense all the colors of a spectrum through sound. This is how color sounds like. So if we could hear color, we would hear these subtle differences now between red and orange. So at the beginning, I had a bit of a headache because it's like having electronic music in your head every single day because there's color absolutely everywhere. So that was the first surprise, that color is absolutely everywhere. So I had to get used to the fact that I was hearing color all the time. But after some months, my brain got used to it, and it became normal. When I was able to sense all the visual spectrums through sound, I didn't see why I should stop there. There's many, many more colors that exist, but that the human eye cannot sense, like infrareds and ultraviolets. But technology can detect these colors. So I included infrared and ultraviolet in the system, so I was also able to hear infrareds and ultraviolets around me. It's very practical because infrareds allow me to know if there's movement detectors in a space, so I can go to a shop or a bank and tell if the alarms are on or off, and in many cases they are off. So it's interesting to know that some of these infrared detectors are not actually working, and ultraviolet perception allows me to know if it's a good day or a bad day to sunbathe. So if I sense there's a high level of ultraviolet, I avoid the sun. So I started this project 15 years ago, and I didn't want to use technology as a tool, and I didn't want to wear technology. I wanted to merge with technology. I wanted this system to become a new part of my body. I wanted it to become a new organ, a new sense, and a part of me. So when I looked at nature, I thought the best thing would be to create or implant a new organ. And then I looked at many species, and I was really interested in antennas, because there's many species that have antennas, and these antennas allow them to sense things that most of us can't sense. So my aim was to create an antenna that would be implanted in my head, and then the antenna would detect the dominant color in front of me. It would send the vibration of color inside my head, and then the chip in my head would vibrate, and this would allow me to hear the sound of color. So when the antenna was finally designed, I went and tried to find a doctor willing to drill my head and implant the antenna inside. But I went to the doctor and they said, sorry, we don't do this here. We don't do antenna implants here. There are still no antennologists in the world. But I presented the surgery to a bioethical committee. I told them what the surgery would be, and they had to decide if it was ethical or not to have this antenna implanted. They decided it was not ethical to have this antenna implanted in my head for 3 reasons. One, because it's not a pre-existing body part. If it was a leg or an arm, they would find it ethical, but an antenna is not a human body part, so it's not ethical for now. Also, because it detects infrareds and ultraviolets, it goes beyond the visual spectrum of a human. They didn't find it ethical. And the third reason was that they were worried about the image the hospital would have if someone came out with an antenna sticking out of the head. So they said no to the surgery, but they helped me find a doctor willing to do the surgery anonymously. So we did the surgery, and this surgery happened in Barcelona. This is my head facing down. My hair was removed, my skin was reduced, and then my head was drilled so I would have the chip inside that now allows me to feel the vibrations inside my skull. So it basically now, the antenna has osseointegrated with my skull, so the antenna is now part of my skeleton. So this means that I'm also officially taller now, because this is part of my body. I had to get used to the vibrations in the bone and in the skull, but I slowly got used to it, and also to the new height. So now, I feel no difference between software and brain. They've merged. I feel that my brain is partly software, and software is partly my brain. I feel no difference between the cybernetics and my organism. That's why I define myself as a cyborg, which basically means cybernetic organism. I feel that I'm not using or wearing technology. I feel that I am technology, and I include technology as part of my identity. And this is what I tried to explain to the UK government in 2004, because I had a problem renewing my passport. They said, sorry, there's something electronic in your passport photo, and they asked me to send a new photo without the antenna. So I replied saying that I was not wearing an antenna, that I have an antenna in the same way that I'm not wearing a nose, I have a nose, and that they should include the antenna as part of my body, part of my identity. I told them that I identified as a cyborg. They replied no. So it became a battle with the passport office trying to convince them. In the end, after several months, they accepted, and they allowed me to appear in the passport with the antenna, which suddenly allowed me to travel freely, because airport security sometimes is a bit, they don't like technology in general. So having it in your passport helps show that it's officially part of my identity now. I'm also now in conversations with the Swedish government, because the materials that I used to create the antenna are Swedish, so I'm telling them that I am Swedish. Therefore, I think I should be allowed to become a Swedish citizen. They still haven't replied, but hopefully they'll say something. So my life has changed in many ways. Hearing color means that I can now dress in a way that it sounds good. Depending on the colors that I put on, I can dress in C major, in A minor, or I can wear a song. So I decide what melody I want to wear. Also, the secondary effect of hearing color is that when I listen to music, each note that I hear relates to a color, so I can paint what I hear. This is Mozart's Queen of the Night. I painted it from the middle to the end, note by note. So this is how Mozart looks like. And this is Baby Baby by Justin Bieber, which looks very different from Mozart. Also, speech has color. Each voice has different colors. This is a speech given by Martin Luther King, I have a dream, transposed into color. And when we listen to different speeches, we can detect different colors and different dominant colors for each person. Also, the way I detect food now has changed. I can listen to food, I can compose music with food, I can eat songs, basically, depending on how I put the food on the plate. So I did a project with Celia de Can Roca, a restaurant in Catalonia, and then we created this plate that mimics the antenna, and it allows people in the restaurant to actually hear the sound of food. So this is how it sounds. So yeah, you can go there and ask for some Lady Gaga dessert or something. You can choose what music you want to eat. It also has changed the way I sense interior design, so I can paint a house so that it sounds good as well. Also, the way I detect art, I can now go into a museum and listen to a Picasso, listen to a Salvador Dali. So almost everything has changed because color is absolutely everywhere. But what really has changed is the way I perceive people, because you all have colors in your faces. So what I really enjoy doing is sound portraits, where I get close to someone's face, and then I write down the sound of the eyes, the lips, the skin, the hair, and then I send them an MP3 of their face so they can listen to the sound of the colors of their face. And one of the first ones I did was of Prince Charles. I asked him if I could listen to his face, and this was his reaction when I asked him. We all sound different. Like Marina Abramovic sounds very low frequencies from F to F sharp. Macaulay Culkin sounds C major, so it's unusual to find a major chord in a face. Iris Apfel has very high-pitched sound of eyes. Philip Glass sounds extremely microtonal. Robert De Niro has a melody in his lips because he has different shades of red. James Cameron has a very high-pitched E sound of his nose sounds E. Steve Wozniak has his eyes sound like tuning forks. It's an A, almost a pure A. And Bono has very loud glasses. So we all have different soundscapes. But what really shocked me is that through all these years, I've been listening to faces for 15 years, and what really shocked me is that people who say they're white, they're not white, and people who say they're black, they're not black. People who say they're white, they're actually very, very light orange, and people who say they're black, they're actually very, very dark orange. So the fact that people say that humans are black and white is completely false. We are all orange. This is an example of how a face sounds like. I can also create rhythms with people's faces. So usually I do this with an audience where I create electronic music from the audience, starting with eyes, lips. I create layers of sound, and the music comes from the faces of the audience. So if the concert sounds really bad, it's not my fault, it's their fault, because that's where the music is coming from. The last face concert was of Prince Albert II of Monaco, and he liked the sound of his face so much that he's using it as his ringtone. So whenever someone calls him, he hears his face. So Moon Ribas is my childhood friend. We both know each other since we were children. We grew up in Barcelona together, and we both studied art together, and we both shared this interest in merging with technology in order to extend our senses and our perception of reality. I was always interested in color. Moon was always interested in movements. So first she had 2 earrings placed in her ears that allowed her to feel movement with her eyes closed. So the earrings would vibrate whenever someone would walk in front. Depending on the interval from ear to ear, she slowly developed the sense of speed. So depending on the interval, she could tell if someone was walking at 5 per hour, 3 per hour, 8 per hour. So she developed a new perception of movement. Also, she did another project where she had a sensor at the back of her head, and she would feel if someone was moving behind her. So she had retroception. She could feel any kind of presence behind her. And finally, what she did some years ago is 2 implants in her feet that allow her to feel the seismic activity of the planet. So her body is connected to online seismographs. So whenever there's an earthquake in the world, this information goes directly into her feet, and she feels the earthquake in her body real time. So this has given her a new heartbeat, because there's like around 200 earthquakes every day. So she feels this constant vibration of the earth inside her body, and she calls it like an earth beat. So she has her own heartbeat and the earth beat. So this gives her a very close connection to the earth. She uses this new sense artistically, so she can now dance whenever she feels an earthquake, and this is what we'll see just after my talk. So she calls this piece Waiting for Earthquakes. She also expresses herself through percussion, so whenever sometimes she does music concerts, so she plays the drum whenever she feels an earthquake real time. So basically, Earth is the composer of her music, and Earth is the choreographer of her dance. Since a few years ago, she's also now connected to the data that comes from the seismograph on the moon. So she feels the moonquakes as well, and this now allows her to feel seismic activity outside our planet. So in the 20th century, we saw how humans went to the moon. On the 21st century, we can see how the moon can enter our bodies. So we think that this is a new way of exploring space. Instead of physically going to space, we can actually have senses in space and feel what's up there. I also use my internet connection in my head to connect to NASA's International Space Station. So this allows me to sense the colors from space. And when I do that, I can sense many ultraviolets that I don't sense here. We call this becoming a senstronaut, basically, because it means that instead of physically going to space, we send our senses there and we explore space without having to physically go there. So having an antenna that is actually quite visible means that I've been stopped every single day in the street by strangers since 2004. So for the last 15 years, people have asked what this is. In 2004, most people thought it was a reading light. So they would ask me if I could turn on the light, or they were wondering where my book was. In 2005, 6, people thought it was a flexible microphone. In 2007, 8, they thought it was a hands-free phone. In 2009, people thought it was a GoPro cam, that I was filming my life. So people would wave at me thinking that I was filming. In 2012, 13, people thought I had something to do with Google Street View. And in 2015, 16, many children asked if this was some kind of selfie stick attached to my head. So it's changed. And last year, many people just shouted at me, Pokemon, and they tried to catch me. So social reaction keeps changing. Hopefully in the future, people will just think it's a new sensory organ, and we'll see more people with new organs and new senses in the street. Moon Ribas and I created the Cyborg Foundation 9 years ago to help other people create their own senses. This is Manal Munoz. He was an artist in residence at the Cyborg Foundation. He now has a sense that allows him to feel the weather. He feels pressure, atmosphere, and temperature in his body. So he's literally a weatherman because he feels the weather in his body. We also did a project with Joe Dagney, so he was another resident. He has echolocations, so he can feel in the same way that bats can feel their surroundings. Also, we created this project, which is basically if you have a tooth missing, you can have it replaced with a tooth with a small light, so that in case of emergency, you can click and then you have emergency light in your mouth. I had it for a while, but the problem is that when you eat, the light goes on and off, so we're trying to find a system that will change. We also created magnetoception hair, so it gives you a sense of magnetism. The hair moves depending on the magnetism around you, so if you walk past a fridge, or the hair definitely goes towards the fridge. We also created the air quality sense. This is Alex. He has it here, and he feels the quality of the air. So when he walks around Barcelona, he feels if the air quality has dropped or is getting better. Also, this is a project Moon and I did in Brazil. A tooth was placed in Moon's mouth. Another tooth was placed in my mouth, and whenever I clicked, she would receive a vibration in her mouth. Whenever she clicked, I received the vibration in my mouth. We both learned the Morse code, so depending on the rhythm, we could actually talk to each other and send words from mouth to mouth. We call this the transdental communication system, and it basically works through Bluetooth. So it's a Bluetooth tooth that allows you to communicate from mouth to mouth. Another implant that Moon and I and Manel have in our legs is geomagnetism, to feel where the magnetic north is. This is something that many species can feel, where the magnetic north is. And also the current project that I'm doing, an organ that will be implanted around my head, is an organ for the sense of time. We all have a sense of time, but we don't have an organ for the sense of time. So this will be a point of heat that will slowly go around my head, and it will take 24 hours to do the complete circle. So I will feel the 24-hour cycle of the Earth around my head. My aim is to see if my brain will get used to this 24-hour cycle. And if in some years it happens, then I want to see if I can modify my perception of time. So if I want the situation to last longer, I'll make the point of heat go a bit faster or a bit slower so that I can actually modify my perception of time. So my aim is to take Albert Einstein's theory of time relativity into practice and see whether or not we can modify our perception of time if we have an organ for time. It should be possible because we can create optical illusions because we have an organ for sight. So if we have an organ for time, we should be able to create time illusions. So that's my current project, and it will be installed in my head later this year. We see all this as species design, designing ourselves. We see this as the art of designing your own senses, the art of designing your own organs, and the art of designing your perception of reality. So we think that now we are in this special moment where we can start actually deciding who we want to be as a species. The technology that we create is not artificial intelligence. We call it artificial senses. If the antenna was telling me the names of colors, that would be AI. Technology would be telling me what colors I have in front, but I didn't want technology to tell me what colors I have in front. I wanted technology to allow me to feel colors, and then it's up to my brain to create the intelligence or not. So what we create are artificial senses that by merging with our brains, we can create new knowledge and new discoveries, because the reality that we are creating is not virtual or augmented. We call it revealed reality. We are now surrounded by things that we cannot sense, but if we merge with technology, we can reveal them. So that's why we find it so exciting to merge with technology, because we can reveal things that exist in nature, but that we cannot sense. So basically, just to end, I think we shouldn't be afraid of becoming cyborgs. We shouldn't be afraid of designing ourselves. We've been a species, but that for thousands of years have been designing the planet and changing the planet in order to feel more comfortable in the planet. But I think this is about to change. We'll start designing ourselves and changing ourselves instead of designing the planet and changing the planet. If we all had night vision, for example, we wouldn't have to create artificial light. All these lights would be off. All Cape Town would be without light, but we would be able to see each other. So this would be much better for the environment, because we wouldn't just have to create artificial light. It would be much better for other species, because we wouldn't be creating light at night, and we would be able to see each other. So I think the more we design ourselves, the better it will be for the planet. If we could control our own temperature, for example, we wouldn't use heaters or air conditioning. So we think that in the future it will be seen socially accepted, and bioethical committees will accept trans-species surgeries. And I think you are probably the first generation that can start experimenting with this. So I encourage you to think about or to design yourselves, and just telling you that you won't be alone. We'll be with you in the process. Thank you very much. So now, Moon Ribas will give her first performance in Africa. So she's been performing Waiting for Earthquakes in many contemporary art museums around the world. And basically, Waiting for Earthquakes is inviting us all to wait for the Earth to vibrate, to move. And whenever there's an earthquake in the world, Moon will dance accordingly to the intensity of the earthquake. So if there's no earthquakes, there will be no dance, basically. But this is going to be an 8-minute performance. And the sound that you will hear is the sound of planet Earth. So I transpose the colors of Earth, of like basically blue and green, into sound. So now you will hear the sound of the colors of Earth, and Moon will dance whenever she feels an earthquake. So Moon Ribas, thank you.